Well, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Sunday Night Live stream. As he looks into the reflection and fixes the few strands of somewhat thinning hair at the top of his head. Hey, what's happening? Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from the Sunday night balcony, the Astro Balcony experience. We had a heck of a rainstorm over the last couple days. Finally, long overdue, delayed. So pretty hot, pretty dry out here in these parts. And hey, what's going on, Eileen? What's happening? I got an email, and I think it was the guy from Armstrong Economics. I think Lynn might have sent this to me. Apparently, it's snowing in South Africa or Africa right now. Wow, how crazy is that? Snowing in Africa at this time of year. Hey, JMP Love, what's going on? What's happening? How was everybody tonight? So we just kind of loosen up, limber up, get ready. Yep, Finka says yes, it is. Hey, Jennifer. Hello, Farah. I always want to put an L after Farah, make it Feral Jade. Hey, JW. Oh, it's Joan. Hi, Joan. Chavi, you guys think that the heat could have something to do with the solar observatory being shut down? Okay, so that's a really great question. And I actually cast a chart for the shutting down of the solar observatory. And you can find that over at robertphoenix.com. I put together a chart and I threw a couple of fixed stars in there. So maybe we can get a sense as to why they decided to do this. And apparently it wasn't the only observatory. There were a couple of others. There was one, I believe, in Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken. Have you guys been checking that out? Let me just see here. Let me just do a little quick type. Let's do this. Shut now. Okay, so it is going to reopen after an FBI investigation. That is from KVIA, and that was 2 hours ago. So the real reason for the solar observatory shutdown, that's a Secure Team 10. A lot of people on YouTube have been pretty active. I put up a really startling video over on my Facebook page about these massive craft that are supposedly hanging out around the sun. Now these rumors have been going on for a while, and that the sun is a source of their power, right? That these massive ships. Now, a long time ago, I used to really be into UFOs. I used to really be into ancient aliens. But I have to admit, I was into ancient aliens when I was like 13 years old. And I actually did a lecture in my 8th grade class on ancient aliens. So it was what, 1973. It was a little ahead of my time. But I was so popular that that they decided to roll me to the next period so I could do it again for another class, right? I guess that was one of the cool things about going to middle school in the 70s, because you had a lot of teachers who were, idealistic, social Marxist, whatever. And there was a lot of loosey-goosey in the 70s with classes. So having a kid teach a class on ancient aliens was not too far out of the wheelhouse for the 70s. So let's just go to this little piece here, which just surfaced 2 hours ago, and it's about the breaking news around the observatory that's being opened back up. Now, this is from a local news channel. You know what I think is interesting about free? Now, I'm not saying that this is what happened or why it happened, but 2 weeks ago we were talking about that compound that was that was raided in another remote part of New Mexico. And, well, that story's gone back down the rabbit hole. And we don't know where those people are. I think they're in the custody of the FBI now. Now, that's probably the worst case scenario, because once the FBI gets a hold of them, there's probably a pretty good chance that that we'll never see them again. Although that one guy does have that rap in Georgia for taking his kid. But you know how these things go. It's not that hard to make people disappear, extract them. So I'm going to read you this story. This is about the solar sunspot solar observatory reopening. Remember, we're talking about this now in New Mexico. We're not talking about the compound event. So the name of the place is actually Sunspot, New Mexico. You can't make this shit up. Sunspot, New Mexico. The solar observatory located in Sunspot, New Mexico, that was closed down for safety reasons, is scheduled to reopen after it was shut down while the FBI investigated the area. According to a release by the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, also known as AURA, isn't that cute? The Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, AURA. All these scientists are just closet mystics. They're just closet mystics. They can't help themselves. The observatory will reopen Monday after criminal activity was reported at Sacramento Peak. Okay, so it was reported, criminal activity. The release also stated that the investigation involved a suspect who AURA officials believed posed a threat to the safety of staff and residents that live nearby. It's a good cover story. AURA has not released the current status of the suspect or any information involving the suspect. It's probably because there was no suspect. ABC 7 learned the observatory had closed on September 6th, and that staff and some residents in the area were forced to evacuate. So that was on September 6th. And we found out about it on September 14th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in and I'm going to change the chart, change the day of the chart. Let me find this. And I'm going to put it in there for the 6th. I'm going to use the same time because we assumed that they want to close it down early. So on 9/6, let's see what this puppy has. Okay. All right. So, wow, that is one massively complex chart. All right, so I'm going to go back in to my website right now, and I want to upload this new chart because it's a very different beast altogether. Holy smokes! Let me do this. Where do you guys get a hold of this? So September 6th is the day. We didn't find out about it until the 14th. That's 8 days later. Okay, 8 days later. So let me get back in here and get rid of this. And I'm going to put the new chart up. Just give me 1 sec, and then you'll be able to go over to my website and check this chart out. There's some shit going on in this chart, let me tell you. And there is a reason why I did this, and you'll see why. You'll definitely see why. Okay, we're almost there. Give me 1 second. By the way, shout outs to Deshaun Jackson and Ryan Fitzpatrick today, both a couple of Sagittarians, and they were on fire like the second sun, let me tell you, fantasy football wise. It's great watching Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's kind of an amazing guy. He's got like 4 planets in Sag, and he's one of these guys. He went to Harvard. He's super smart, very funny, extremely funny. And when he's on, he is the epitome of Sag. I mean, he is amazing. And when he's off, he goes in just the same direction. You know, he'll throw for 4 touchdowns one week, and then the next week he'll throw for 4 interceptions. So he's got a pretty significant Sagittarian thing going on. Anyway, he hooked up with fellow Sag, Deshaun Jackson, and they couldn't be from more different places, which is very Sagittarian in a lot of ways. Deshaun Jackson from the streets of LA, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, graduate of Harvard. Okay, I'm updating the site, and you could go back over there now and check it out. And so I wanted to see what would happen if we got a snapshot of when they shut it down. So I was assuming that they would have gone in there pretty early in the day, like around 8 a.m., you know, because you don't want to let it linger. Just my 2 cents. So if you go to my website, excuse me, you can check this out, right? Because there's a grand cross in here. It is a cube. There is a cube, and it is a freaking powerful cube. We got the Venus-Uranus opposition. We've got the Moon-Mars opposition, Mars square Uranus, Moon square Uranus, Venus square Uranus. By and large, this is a pretty unstable day and time. And I caught it at 8 a.m. in the morning, like I said, because they probably wanted to get in and get these people out of there. So the Grand Cross is like a cage. The square or the cube is in some ways like a cage. It is, well, that's what we would, you know, have a relationship with the square or the cube. And of course, it is Saturnian by its nature, with all the hard angles. And the square, in my estimation, is a Saturnian angle in the chart, right? It's got that hard edge to it. And as a square, it's also the building block of the world. The world is built on squares and to some extent rectangles. So we have this, you know, very intense, very powerful Grand Cross going on. And the players are fascinating. But here's what I really wanted to kind of, we're going to get into that. Here's what I wanted to look at is the sun is hidden. Like if they went in at about 8 in the morning and shut this thing down, the sun is hidden. It's in the 12th house. So there is a mystery and a secret to the sun. And there's something going on with the sun. Remember, this is a sunspot, New Mexico. I have it as Alamogordo. It's not that far away. And what we see here in this chart is we see it's not just a Grand Cross. No, it's more than that. There's actually this really intense opposition, like a spear that goes right through the center of that Grand Cross. And that's the Neptune-Sun opposition. This is a really important aspect to wrap your head around, because when we get into anything with Neptune, which I've talked about ad infinitum, we get into obfuscation, we get into delusion, delusion, we get into illusion. All these Neptunian kinds of adjectives come into play. We can also get into profundity and transcendence and depth and psychic awareness. I mean that's the upper spectrum of Neptune, the higher vibratory spectrum of Neptune. The lower vibratory spectrum of Neptune brings you into not just the world, but the descent into another world. And the descent into this other world is the descent into these oceanic depths. Now, remember, Poseidon or Neptune, they both stand for the same entity. They ruled over the ocean. And the ocean was often viewed as another aspect or element of the underworld, because we know that Pluto and Hades ruled the actual physical structure of the earth, like land. They're underneath there. That's their domain. And when we enter into that domain, we are entering into a place of great depth, heat, intensity. To some degree, Pluto can resemble hell. Okay, that's like the dark side of Pluto. When you're going through a heavy Pluto transit, it feels like hell. It does. It feels like hell. It's just the nature of it. It's a very intense process. If you ever live with the sun on your Pluto line, you don't get days off. You're always facing your fears and always transforming. And it can be a very powerful place once you figure it out and learn how to, you know, channel that Plutonian energy and let go and surrender, and get stronger as a result of that. Pluto can the Plutonian energy, the the allegory of living with that becomes very powerful because ultimately, like I say, on your Pluto line or like with Pluto on your ascendant, if you ever live with Pluto on your ascendant, and I have, by the way, I've lived with Pluto on my ascendant, and it's intense. It's intense. Now here in Texas, Pluto is just off of my ascendant, so it's in my 12th house by about 3 degrees. It's very close to my ascendant. So when I moved here, well, it's still here. When I was in California, it was on the other side. I had a better handle on it in some ways. Here, it's always kind of lurking in that 12th house. It's a very intense feeling to have Pluto just, hanging out on the ascendant. But I'll tell you right now, it is some powerful medicine, really powerful. I mean, it's the ultimate trip. I mean, Pluto is the ultimate trip. But let's bring it back to Neptune. Neptune is the aqueous, the aquatic, the watery, the oceanic equivalent in many cases of Pluto. I mean, this is what Poseidon does. He's the same. I mean, just because he talks to animals doesn't make him any nicer. Just because Neptune Poseidon can ride a dolphin, right? Isn't that what they did with Aquaman and Submariner? I used to dig the Submariner. He looked like Leonard Nimoy, didn't he? I swear to God, they saw Leonard Nimoy in an early movie. Leonard Nimoy had been around for a long time, and they saw him in an early movie, and I think he became the Submariner. Namor. Namor was his name, which is Roman backwards. Anyway, they got to have all those cool relationships with all the undersea life. But at the same time, it doesn't make them any more warm and fuzzy than their subterranean counterpart. Like you get down into the depths of Neptune, you feel like you're fucking drowning. Okay? That's the nature of Neptune. You feel like you're drowning. And when you are down in Neptune, this is when people feel overwhelmed or they become overcome by their life circumstances and they can't feel like they're coming up for air. It's a very challenging transit if you've got it going on. And you could have it at any certain point with Neptune. Neptune transiting in the opposition to the sun. It's like it's pulling you. It's like, here comes the Neptune, right? It's pulling you down, pulling you in, it's sucking you in to that whirlpool, that vortex. Or maybe you can learn something if you want to bottom out, quite possible. Or you can try to figure out how to deal with Neptune and reconcile it by finding the midpoint. Or you can dive down and come up for air and come back again. That's another way of dealing with it. If Neptune is on your sun, you can be blissfully unaware of what's going on in your life. And maybe that's not such a bad thing at times. But again, you have this potential of not being able to see yourself or see how the world sees you. Or, I mean, there's some interesting possibilities with a Neptune Sun conjunction. But there's also a sense of being swallowed up in some ways, not dragged down, but kind of swallowed up and walking around in a kind of a very aqueous bubble, which, might be blissful to some extent with this world. And then the Neptune squares, which I've talked about quite often, are hard angles to whatever the planet, and the sun. It's like the hard angle, the square to Neptune is a little bit different than the opposition. It's like when you're in an opposition, when you're in opposition to Neptune, you're doing everything you can to maintain your gravity and stay on top of the earth. With the square to Neptune, It's like there are moments where you take on water. It's a bit different. And then you have to kind of bail that water out. And as a result, you can become, quite soggy personally and give into any number of vices or habits, or this is where we get into the realm of addiction with the Neptune squares. Okay, so that said, look at this chart. Here we have the sun, and it's in the 12th house. Again, you go to my website, robertphoenix.com. This is where the chart is, and you can look along. So the sun is hidden. There is something hidden from us with this chart with the sun. Again, I'm picking the hour of 8 o'clock because I would assume that when they go in to shut something down, they want to shut it down early. 8 o'clock, it's probably when people show up to work. Boom, shut it down. There's the sun. There's the opposition to Neptune. What are we not seeing? What Neptunian cloud is obfuscating this hidden sun in the 12th house? What is it? Well, we know whatever is going on is that we're dealing with the power and the pattern of this Grand Cross, or the cage of the world, the Saturnian hypercube. It's right here. So this is a very complex chart. There's also a grand trine here. It's a very powerful grand trine. And how I read this grand trine is like, if you look, there's Saturn right at the bottom of the chart. So what does Saturn represent? Saturn represents the world, our structures, hierarchies, bureaucracies, fathers, grandfathers, discipline, structure, form, the devil, Satan. These are all manifestations of Saturn. But let's just use probably the most commonplace one at this point: hierarchies, bureaucracies, governments. It's right down there at the bottom of the chart, right in the 4th house, right in the core of the moments for this observatory. So what's Saturn doing here? It's taking control at a core level. So if we want to look at this, we want to assign the meaning and the value of Saturn as the sort of the locus of organization and bureaucracies, hierarchies, like the government, the FBI. They're taking control. They're going right in to the bottom of this chart, and they're saying we're asserting control. Now there's a trine going on with Uranus and a trine going on with Mercury. They saw something. There is something going on. Now, why do I say this? Well, because Mercury represents vision. It represents vision, it represents our ability to communicate, our ability to see. And if you look at Mercury, it is at 0 degrees. Sorry, it is at 0 degrees Virgo, and it is at exactly conjunct Regulus. That's kind of interesting. It's exactly conjunct Regulus. Regulus was in Leo for thousands of years. I mean, that's why it was called the Royal Star, because it was in the sign of Leo. Well, that changed. That changed a few years ago when it transited into, guess what, Virgo. Now, I talked about this when it happened. And when Regulus went into Virgo, I thought, well, this is a game changer. This is a total game changer, because this star, this was one of the key stars in the life and times and the birth of Sananda. And it went from Leo, the star of the king, to Virgo, the star of the servant and the star of the people. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. It is. And if you're born right at the beginning of Virgo, like the 23rd of September, you got Regulus transiting right on your sun, which is interesting, right? Sorry, 0 Virgo, 28 Leo, 0 Virgo, my bad. Which is interesting because the big solar eclipse that we had, the Great American Eclipse, and that was in August of 2016, right? August of 2016. And God, that was right before the election. That was crazy, crazy time. Absolutely crazy time. So that was on the 21st of August, and the sun was at 28 Leo. So it was just 2 degrees off of Regulus. Normally Regulus would be right there, right in that eclipse, but it was close enough. Anyway, so at the time of this, right, Mercury was exact Regulus. So how do I interpret that? Well, I interpret that they saw something vis-a-vis Mercury that got them in touch with something much bigger, much bigger than they can comprehend. Because even though Regulus went into Virgo, it does not necessarily make it more diminutive in its stature. This is a pretty significant fixed star that moved 1 degree. So perhaps what they saw was alarming to the extent that it made them feel perhaps a bit smaller, right? And having to deal with whatever it is they were spying in the sky. Again, here the sun is hidden and there's the opposition to Neptune. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to figure out, they're trying to figure it out. It could be any number of things. It could be a hoax, right? It could be a hoax. It could be like really serious, significant kind of contact shit. It could be Project Bluebeam. It's very hard to discern what this is because of the Neptune opposition. In order for us to understand this, where would we have to go? We'd have to go into the 12th house to understand the nature of this experience. So one of the things that probably would be helpful if you didn't have your own astronomical equipment is this would be a great topic or subject to remote view, because that's the 12th house. Right? You get in, you get to kind of have this relationship with this object or this event, but it is not direct. It is indirect, and you're having to go through a portal of your own to have that experience. Now, what's interesting is that the description, some of the videos that I've seen are about these massive craft. And some of them are known to be anywhere between 250 miles to the size of 2 Earths. I mean, this is what I've read. I'm not an expert ufologist. It's not a world that I really follow, but I'm just giving you some feedback from some of the stuff that I've been piecing together and reading. Well, here we go. There's that Jupiter-Sun sextile, and it makes whatever around the sun or the sun itself more important. There's a sense of expansion, something large, a relationship to the sun. Okay. The other planet I was looking at was a fixed star. My apologies. Was Sirius, and at 8 in the morning, it's close to the midheaven. If you were to go back in time, if we were to change the time, you get closer to the midheaven. But Sirius is the highest point in the chart. Well, technically, the highest point would be Uranus, but here it's occupying the 10th house, which I think is interesting because it has a real place of prominence. And the degree of Sirius happens to be at 14 Cancer. 14 Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that it's right around the birthday of the United States, which connects us up to Sirius, of course, the dog star. It's also the blazing star, and it is a star that is favorited. Not even favorited. I mean, the Freemasons, the Masons believe that Sirius is their heaven. That when they die, that's where they go, or they even go to Sirius. I mean, you get up into the upper echelons of Freemasonry, it's about channeling the powers of the trans-Plutonian planets. And that's what they're into. So when they get into what they do, they are aligning themselves with the cosmic forces of the Transplutonians. That's their thing. They're bringing those Transplutonians into their body, and the whole idea with Freemasonry is to master those energies, those furies. It's what Albert Pike called them. Anyway, Sirius is pretty high in this chart. It's occupying the 10th house, which means that it has prominence. And it has Saturnian prominence. It has worldly prominence. So again, this is just at 8 o'clock in the morning, being where it is. The Grand Cross for this event is very, very interesting because we're dealing with something hidden in the 8th house in Taurus. Remember, Taurus is just Uranus just gone into Taurus, so we're dealing with something hidden here vis-a-vis the placement. And Uranus represents technology. So is one of the reasons that they shut this down because there's a technological piece that's being hidden from us, while the sun in the 12th house is also being hidden at the same time? Question mark. The Mars square to Uranus is an indication that there's something about technology here that can get out of control. When you get into Mars-Uranus squares, you're getting into something that can be volatile. It could be explosive. It can be radical. It's hard to handle the energy of a Mars-Uranus square. If you had a Mars-Uranus square in your chart, you would be somebody who would be very different and would have a hard time, I think, in a lot of ways, with third dimensional reality. And you would always have to fight. You'd have to be in battle with the forces of inertia. That's number one. And the forces of creativity. That's number two. And the forces of chaos. Number three. You'd always be in constant struggle with those energies. And it would be very challenging to run that energy all the time. It would feel, to me, it feels like burnout, like neural burnout. But on the other hand, it could also be like wildly and madly inspired. I think Mars Uranus squares have a bit of cruelty in them as well. That's my sense here. So there's something about this Mars Uranus square in this moment with Uranus hidden in this moment in the 8th house, that it's like, are we dealing with something that has the potential to be in conflict with us with the Mars Uranus square? Even if it's a Project Bluebeam production, it would still be something that we would be in contact with. Okay. In conflict with. All right. So LeBron James is everywhere now. And I have this theory about, I'm going to bring this back to this whole bit here. I have this theory about LeBron James. And I think they're really trying to make LeBron James into the king of this world. That's what I think. I think that they have some kind of plan. I know it sounds nuts. I think they've got some kind of plan with LeBron James that at some point when we have this one world order or this new world order, that LeBron James is going to play a significant role in however this thing shakes out if we go in that direction. Because it's not just like making money off LeBron James. They've been doing that with athletes for years. I've never seen a deification of an athlete like I've seen with LeBron James, who happens, by the way, to be a Capricorn. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but I was thinking about that. So the reason why I was thinking about it is because LeBron James has half a dozen new shows he's doing now. He and his production team, who's led by this guy, Maverick Carter, longtime friend of LeBron James. They have a show that takes place in a barbershop. And LeBron James has people that come over to this barbershop. In the very first show, One of the guests on there is Jon Stewart. And if Lynn or somebody in the chat room wants to find this, you could probably find it on YouTube and stick the link in the chat room. Jon Stewart is sitting there and he says, we tend to be tribal people. And he says, do you know what would bring the people of Earth together into one tribe? Now look around and go, this is a fucking alien invasion. Think about it. So this is Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is not somebody who's insignificant. It's another Sagittarius, by the way. Jon Stewart was chosen to play a role, and he's played the role very, very well. Jon Stewart more into news, and it hasn't been the same since then. People used to get their news from Jon Stewart because it was funny and it confirmed their bias. And he left. He left his show, and he was replaced ultimately by Stephen Colbert, who left the show, who was replaced by Trevor Noah, who I think is still there. But one of the things I remember reading about Jon Stewart that was interesting was that he claimed to be part of the Knights Templar and had some ungodly sum of money that he was connected to. You could go check this out. So why was Jon Stewart on LeBron's show? Jon Stewart hasn't been anywhere for a couple of years. I think he's gone into semi-retirement along with Jerry Seinfeld. I think they go to the mall and ogle girls in New Jersey. I think that's what they've been doing for the last 2 years. But no, so Jon Stewart comes on the show and he just drops this thing about, oh, you know what would bring us all together? A fucking alien invasion. Oh, wow. That show debuted 2 weeks ago. It was 3 weeks ago. It was right after Hard Knocks, an episode of Hard Knocks. So that's kind of been in the air. That's been in circulation. I'm just pointing this out. This is interesting because there's conflict in this chart, and it's not ordinary conflict. This is not ordinary conflict. Now, I don't know where I am on the whole alien trip. I do believe that they're interdimensional entities and beings. And if aliens do exist, I feel like that's what they are, and they slip through portals. They don't travel through space. I'm getting a little out there tonight, but they fold time, or they use the sun as a portal. And the sun has been known as a portal for a very, very long time. So my good friend Eddie Lynn, who I want to have on my show one of these days, he was talking about this theory today on my Facebook page, which I have heard. This is where Sirius comes into play, is that the sun is a black hole. And that Sirius, the binary star of the sun, is right there, and it is a portal. The sun is a portal, and it's a portal to where Sirius is. It gets you to completely another part of the universe. Eddie thinks it's to an entirely different universe, and that may be the case. Back in antiquity, when we had the pyramids that were freshly built, one of the things that people have talked about, it's been mentioned, that there would be groups of souls that would actually come through the sun, and then they would hit these soul catchers on the moon and then come down, and particularly in specific cases, one of them would occupy the body of a pharaoh. And so the pharaoh would be resurrected. And this is theoretically, this is where some people believe the resurrection story comes into play. I'm not sure I entirely believe it, but it's interesting. And the sun as a portal makes a lot of sense, especially if you look at some of these images that are out there about what people think that they've seen around the sun. So it would make sense that They'd be parking right outside that portal, getting all charged up for whatever they need to do. Quite possibly. I'm just throwing it out there. But again, we have this Grand Cross. The other part of the Grand Cross was the moon square Uranus, right? What happens when the moon squares Uranus? It's lunacy. That's what it is. It's lunacy. Because the moon is our emotions, and squaring Uranus makes it difficult. You have difficult emotions. You can have crazy emotions. Sometimes you can be very tolerant. Sometimes you can be really off the wall. Sometimes you can, sort of be slightly mad, right? But probably never dull and unsettled. There's an unsettling energy with this chart. The Venus Moon square, that's difficult. Like if you were to have Venus Moon in your chart, it'd be difficult to get along with people. Very difficult. How you feel or what your expectations were with your feeling would not always be in alignment with who you're hanging out with. I mean, that's a tricky piece. So again, with all these squares, you can work with them and go through them, and you can kind of round the square a little bit. But in a chart like this, what we're looking at is kind of a horary example of that moment, the chart of that moment. So it's not like we're looking to evolve our relationship with something that could be crazy. Although I suppose on some level we're trying to understand it. We're trying to figure out what's going on. There's, plenty of internet sleuths who are hot on the case. I'm just looking at it from this astrological perspective. But Saturn is trying to take control down at the bottom of the chart. It's in trine with Uranus. It's in trine with Mercury. So it's taking control. It's trying to marshal those forces of the moment, right at the core of the experience and right at the core of the chart. There's a lot of other stuff going on here too. We've got the Mars opposition to the moon. Again, it's agitated. It's whatever happened there freaked these people out, I think. When I look closer into this chart, I think people got freaked out. I think they got freaked out and they put something into gear. Remember, that's the area theoretically where it's not that far from Roswell, where the saucer crashed. I've been to Roswell. It's an unusual place. If you ever are in that part of the world, you should go and go to the Roswell Museum. It's a trip. It's a total trip. But this chart is fascinating. It's totally fascinating. There's also these inconjuncts and a yod going on. That's worth looking at because the yod is from Mercury. What we've seen or what they saw, how it's being communicated, and the yod happens to be with, it's just kind of the seventh house. There's a yod from Mercury to the seventh house cusp of the descendant. But the real action there is Mars. And the Mars in conjunct. It's like, what do we do? How do we marshal our forces? How do we take action? There's something unusual about that Mars, Mercury in conjunct. You know what else is really fascinating too? Is all this talk about Trump and Space Force over the course of the last few months. Feels like we're getting ready to roll out with a version of Starship Troopers. That movie. If you do not like bugs, that movie could be your worst nightmare. But it's also like revenge porn on bugs. I think it's a funny movie. Anyway. What else is happening here? We got so there's a Pluto Sun trine going on as well, and a Sun Jupiter sextile happening. Again, that's all behind the scenes with that Sun. And there's some kind of I wouldn't call it mobilization per se, but fortification for sure with Pluto in the fourth house. It's like That's the home, and getting intense around that space. And Jupiter isn't quite stressed, or it's got that sextile to the sun and trine to Neptune. It's interesting because it's in the second house. I wonder if somebody's going to try to make money off of this. It's quite possible. Maybe already they have. But again, with the Jupiter trine to Neptune, you can begin to buy in more in some ways. Like it's, that maybe it's not so fantastic with the Jupiter Neptune trine. Anyway, I just thought we'd play with this tonight and see what we can come up with. There's some interesting things in here, especially with Sirius in the 10th house. Let me check in with you guys in the chat room. What do you think? What do you think of the chart? What do you think was going on in New Mexico? I love your feedback. Let's see. They closed down all sun observatories. Okay, there you go. That's from Finca, aka Lynn. What else? It feels like Trump's team is using Ronald Reagan's legacy to shape his term. Yeah, except there weren't so many leakers during the Reagan regime. Let's see. I live in Georgetown, Massachusetts, pretty close to Lawrence, Andover gas event. Any thoughts on that? Oh, yeah. I talked about that on the show on Friday. That was really weird. I mean, that was a very strange event. Maybe we should do a chart for that. Let's look at this. Let's just see what happens. Let's play around with it. Okay, so Andover gas explosions. All right, I'm not going to put this on the site, but you guys can do this if you want. You can play around with it. So it says overpressure in pipes caused Massachusetts gas explosion. Overpressure. Well, from an astrological perspective, that would be Neptune. Okay, it could be Neptune. It could also be Uranus a little bit of Pluto, because you're dealing with some interesting confluences of elements. Number one, they're underground. Number two, it was sudden. That's Uranus. And number three, natural gas is Neptunian. It is a gas. Right? It is a gas. It is a liquid. Liquids and gases are Neptunian. So let's see what we have here. This is from the 14th. Fear, flames, panic. Man, it's amazing what these people went through. Holy shit. All right, so what do we have here? It was at 216. Just trying to find a date. Be really helpful if they did that, include it in the stories, so you didn't have to run around. 8 hours ago. Okay. So let's do this. We'll back it up here. So updated. Let's see what we have. Just trying to get a good time fix. Okay. All right. So they were able to return to their homes on today at 7 a.m. What's interesting about that event is that they mentioned that a third party had come into the lines. And it kind of changes their story a little bit, that they're talking about now the overpressure. Well, that's kind of a interesting metaphor, isn't it, for the world? Okay. All right, I got the time. Let me bang this out here. Give me one sec. So it was on the 13th of September. If you want to play at home, you can go over to AstroDienst and do the same thing I'm doing right now. And you can create a chart. So it is the 13th of September, and it's 2018. And the place that we're going to go with, what is Wikipedia saying here? Lawrence. Let's use Lawrence. Lawrence was the one that always kind of popped to the top. So let's go Lawrence. Massachusetts. And then the rough time here that's listed happens to be 4:15 p.m. 4:15 p.m. Okay. I think only one person died. That was the kid in the car. Isn't that right? Still, the whole thing is bizarre. Okay, let's check it out. All right, so what I have here, oh wow, this is very intense. This is very, very intense. So at that time, the ascendant was at 22 Capricorn, and Pluto's at 20. So that gets right into that area that I was talking about at the beginning of the show, with Pluto just trying to come in onto the ascendant. I mean, this is very intense energy, the Pluto energy. And it has the power to kind of reshape the environment, right? And Pluto and Uranus tend to be explosive. There's Mars in the first house too. And there's that south node right in the first house. And of course, there's still that Neptune Sun opposition going on. And then Neptune opposing Mercury, and there's Sun and Mercury in the eighth house. Again, we're dealing with a lot of hidden material here. It's interesting because these two events are in some ways synonymous. Sun in the eighth house. In New Mexico, Sun was in the 12th house. Here it's Pluto and Saturn. Saturn is in the 12th house. So certainly something is going on at a much larger level that's being tucked away, like the Saturnian forces, or the people that are running the investigation, trying to figure this stuff out. My sense is that they know, with Saturn in the 12th. I mean, yes, clearly this is what's happened in that moment, but I would say that they knew what was going on, or what went on. The Sun, Jupiter, and the Moon are right at the top of the chart in Scorpio, which is, it's pretty interesting because we're dealing with homes. The Moon is the home, correct? And Jupiter, has a very expansive effect. Now, none of these planets are challenged, by the way. There's no dissonance here, but there is a trine from Neptune to Jupiter and the Moon. Okay, so where is Neptune? Well, it's in the second house. In this chart, it's in the second house. What is the second house? It is, boom, it is Taurus, Earth, what's underneath everything, right? It's like it's terra firma. That's the second house. Remember when I said Neptune is gas? Because Neptune is gas and water. We have Neptune in the second house. There you go. There's your gas, Neptune, and we have the topical representation of the second house. What is going on with Neptune? Well, we've got a Sun opposition to Neptune, a Sun-Mercury conjunction opposition to Neptune. Here's what I think. I think that was an event that was triggered by an excess of cosmic rays. That's what I think. There are people, if you follow some of the stuff around what's going on with levels of methane and things exploding spontaneously, I mean, this is no joke, because what's happening is that the oceans are having these methane gases that are being released from the ocean floor. And it's like the ocean is becoming combustible. We also have the same thing happening with permafrost. So the permafrost is beginning to exude higher levels of methane, which means that the planet's becoming more combustible. And there's a lot of work that's been done around this. So let's throw in the fact now that we're having these intense radiations of cosmic rays that we've been dealing with. And there are spectrometers now that are able to prove that there are greater levels of cosmic rays. And then when we have greater levels of cosmic rays, we have greater levels of disturbance inside the Earth. So could it be possible then that what the people in Massachusetts were experiencing at that time, for whatever reason, was a highly intense concentration of cosmic ray activity getting in and messing with the gas levels and the pipe levels? Now, I know that they were on strike. Okay, I know they were on strike. They had been out. So there could be some pretty nefarious stuff going on, especially with Saturn kind of hanging out in the 12th. But we're looking at the sun here. This is a common theme that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the sun. So are the two incidents linked somehow? Possibly. Possibly. We still have that that Mars-Uranus square. We have the Venus-Uranus opposition and the Mars square to Venus. So Mars in the first house squaring Uranus is violent. It's explosive, right? I was telling you, that's an explosive energy, Mars-Uranus square. But the fascinating part to me is the 8th house. The 8th house. Interesting. The 8th house, too, also has this representation of the underworld, right? Like the 2nd house is kind of topical in some ways. Like you can get into the 8th house, I'm sorry, the 2nd house. And like when you go mining, that's a 2nd house experience. You're looking for stuff that's hard, hard metals, hard assets. It's Taurus. But the 8th house also represents the underworld as well. So I'm also wondering if there's not just something that's taking place above, but perhaps also below, from below the surface, because you're dealing with this 8th house, 2nd house opposition. So whether it's the external sun or the sun that's inside of the Earth, which some people do believe exists, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that per se, because there's some interesting ideas about levels, right? Levels of reality and what's above us and below us and all that stuff. But I believe that the sun had something to do with this explosion in Andover, with this opposition, particularly how it's placed with Neptune in the 2nd house, right? So this is fascinating. And then what happens is that there is an abundance of something, because you've got that trine to Jupiter and the moon at the midheaven, the moon being the home. And so you have this abundance of of Neptune coming out of the 2nd house and going right up to the top of the chart in the midheaven, with the stress and the intensity coming in from the sun and Mercury from the 8th house and firing Neptune beneath the surface, right? Uranus 3rd house, it's local. The 3rd house is like a local environment. The 3rd house is like subdivisions and tract homes in a lot of ways. So you have Uranus here. It's explosive. It's very explosive. So I gave you the coordinates. You can pull that chart up, and let me see if you guys have any insight into that at all in your own way. Weather warfare tech being used. Well, I think we're getting really close to this Atlantean phase. Atlantean phase. I feel like that's where we are. I was told every 11 years Jupiter and the Earth line up, operating the solar minimum, supposedly affecting sunspot activity relative to shutdown, May 8th, 2018 to date. I think that's a pretty good bit of information there. And yes, that is correct. Hey, Charles, what's happening? So, wow, we're living in interesting times, aren't we? There was another thing I wanted to bring up. Oh, yeah. It was the Atlantean bit with China. It really feels like we're getting ready to, there are all these markers, these Atlantean markers, these post-Atlantean markers now. We're dealing with things like chimeras. We're dealing with like transgenderism. I mean, at some point, it won't be just transgenderism anymore. Let's say you wanted to be part human or and part penguin. I mean, I think science would probably get to a point where they would try to approximate that to the best of their ability. So we're seeing a lot of these Atlantean markers now with the technology stuff and with the weather wars and some of the hardcore black tech. And then the interesting thing, when you go back and look at like the Casey material, and he talks about Atlantis, and he talks about how they were involved in a war with the area that's roughly where China is today, and that the whole thing like happened, that everything got displaced when the Atlanteans fired a charge through the earth to take out, this group. I don't think they were Lemurians because Lemurians weren't that sophisticated. The Lemurians were not that sophisticated. They were very powerful in their ability to manifest their physical abilities in the material world, but they didn't hold a candle to the Atlanteans and their technology. Crystal oscillators for modern tech. Yep. Dolores Cannon. I couldn't wrap my head around Dolores Cannon. A lot of people like her. I couldn't. I got one of her books one time. It wasn't my thing, but I know a lot of people like her, and her daughter's doing a bunch of stuff now. There might be a solar observatory near Andover, quite possibly. I mean, I think they could just shut that down. I don't think it'd have to be so dramatic. I'm going with the fact that something was going on at that, because you'll see these spontaneous explosions taking place. They happen, and they happen sometimes with people or with cars. So we had an area there. And I think once you have one spontaneous explosion, it's like a tripwire. And if there are any kinds of stresses inside of the system, that of course you get spark and things could get really crazy. But it's fascinating to watch, some of the stuff where one house would be just completely obliterated, bombshelled, and another house would be just fine right next to it. And I don't think it's the same thing as what's been happening in California. There's a lot of debate in California about just in general if those were weapons, direct energy weapons, that fired those fires up. And some people claim they have, like that guy at Plain Truth claims he has very specific evidence. There are people who will refute that. I mean, that's kind of the time we're living in now. By the way, this is. I want to try to relate this back to astrology, and I will. So when we went through that Mars retrograde phase with Uranus, I'm sorry, in Aquarius, when we went through that Mars retrograde in Aquarius, one of the things that happened during that time was that, of course, Alex Jones, who, by the way, looks like hell. I don't know if you've seen him lately. He looks like hell, and he's off on a weird self-destructive trip right now. I don't think Alex is coming back. I thought that InfoWars would come back. I don't think it's happening. Even if they did do it on a Mercury retrograde, I think Alex Jones is in peril because he looks like shit. And he was going off on this talk show about how he's ready to die, that he's a dead man. This guy just had a kid. He's got a new wife and a new kid, and it's going down in flames. It's just going down in flames. Anyway, so when Alex Jones got removed from the internet, now you can't find him anywhere on the internet unless you go to InfoWars. But that was just the first move. There are other websites that went down, and I went to a Reddit page last night because they had the videotape of Pence getting that piece of paper from that state trooper or whatever she was. Have you guys seen that? Pence does this Masonic handshake with the knuckle thing, which is very weird, right? And Trump looks at it and he's like, "What the fuck is going on here?" Pence is not trustworthy at all. Not at all. His Pluto, by the way, is conjunct Donald Trump's ascendant. Think about that. Mike Pence's Pluto is conjunct Donald Trump's ascendant. So, there's a showdown with Mike Pence at some point that'll represent some degree of finality between the two of them. And I believe Mike Pence's moon is on Donald Trump's sun. Pence is born on a new moon. He's a new moon. He's a Gemini sun, Gemini moon. We got a chart for the West Australia earthquake. Okay, so check this out. Okay, check this out. So I went to this page on Reddit to find this link to this event with Pence and the knuckle handshake and everything. And Reddit had shut the page down. They'd shut it down. And they shut it down 3 days ago. And the name of the page was The Great Awakening. That was the name of the page. So it was a page that was connected to Great Awakening, Red Pill, QAnon stuff, and Reddit shut it down. Just this gives you an idea as to where this is all going. Now, just a few days ago, the EU passed an absolutely draconian act, a bill that will impose not just higher degrees of censorship, but higher degrees of censorship through imposing fees for using things like images or even linking to news websites. This is what the EU has done. Okay, this is all part of what happened when Mars was retrograde. When Mars was retrograde, there was this pendulum of free speech that was swinging backwards. Because when we think of freedom of expression, I would say there are two signs that come into play: Sagittarius and Aquarius. That we're able to freely express ourselves. Sagittarius, there's the kind of the internal motivation for it, and Aquarius is like the big fuck you. I'm going to tell you what I think, or I'm going to give you my peace of mind, or we all get to do this, right? So when Mars went retrograde, it was swinging backwards. So the pendulum was going backwards, with us being able to actively engage in a communal Aquarian act of sharing information freely. And during that time, some very significant things happened. It wasn't just Alex Jones having his website taken down, although that was a watershed moment. Not his website, I'm sorry. His Facebook account, ultimately Twitter feed, and YouTube, of course, was the big hit for Jones. But the EU also came up with a whole new set of guidelines. And those guidelines had to do with things like privacy and information. And if you were using a website that was an e-commerce website, it was all about how long they could have your info, what they would do with your info, and all these pieces that were associated with it. If the website was a social media website, then it had to do with things like hate speech. Now, once this was enacted with the EU, and once it was set out to become the industry standard in this country and the world for that matter, then the pieces were in place. Because if you wanted to go to a website, if you wanted to participate, you had to opt in. If you wanted to buy something, you had to opt in. There was no choice. If you opt out, you cannot use that service. That is a sign and a shape of things to come. Because there's going to be an opt-in point that you're going to have to make a choice, and you're going to have to make a decision about what you're going to want to opt in on. And I guarantee you those consequences will be tremendous, and will not only have life-changing impact, but a soul-changing impact as well. And so what happens is we get conditioned to make these small little concessions, to give these small pieces of consent so that we can participate in this new world, or this world that has become developed for us over the last 20 years, right? Okay, so that happened. Once that happened, they laid the track for taking Alex Jones down. Now here's what's going on. Now Mars is swinging forward. And just as it swung forward, the EU struck again. And they passed another law about taxation and tax links and being taxed on images, which is going to lead to more censorship and more limiting controls. This is really a big deal. This is a very, very big deal, because it's going to limit the scope of being able to source stories. So if you wanted to use a link to a story that was on, let's say I just linked to that story on KVIA in New Mexico, based on what's going on with the EU. And they've become the industry standard now that I would, if I'd linked to that on my blog, that I would have to pay KVIA a fee to use that link. This is what's coming. And this is what happens when Mars swings forward. They took the time with the retrograde, they got everything into place, and now here comes the wrecking ball. So just keep your eyes on what's happening. When I went to that webpage last night and I saw that it was just an obscure little fucking webpage on Reddit about, Red Pill, Great Awakening, and Reddit shut it down. Reddit at one point had kind of a it had kind of a vibe where it wasn't quite 4chan, it wasn't quite 8chan, but it was this whole different sort of universe, and it was a bit more Wild Westy. No, that's not the case anymore. By the way, that's run by Serena Williams' husband, or at least I think it was at one point. He was the founder of it. I don't know if he's still involved. He might have sold it, whatever. What do we have here? Yes, the whole agenda in all this is fuller control of the whole internet. Oh, absolutely. People on YT are being banned if they share Alex Jones's videos. I didn't know that. I'm telling you, man, things are, I created 2 channels. Not that I'm like, I don't have like huge numbers, right? But I created another channel. So if you want to see 15 Minutes of Flame or the Friday Farcast, I have another channel for that now. This is my astrology channel, and the occasional, Emily stuff or Randy stuff every now and then that we'll do. But, this is my bread and butter. This is how, I make a living, by working with you people, and I'm not going to jeopardize it. So I've got a new channel, and it's 15 Minutes of Flame. It's under Robert Phoenix. It's a Robert Phoenix channel over on YouTube. So if you want to connect on with me on Monday through Friday, where we get into a lot of this stuff, it's over there now. So yeah, we're living. It's just totally draconian. And I talked about this before with the EU. I got to do a chart on the EU. I'm going to do that next week. So next, a lot of people say, "Well, what about the EU? What about the EU?" Okay, I've done stuff with the EU before on my website, and I'll do another chart with the EU. And right now, in my estimation, they're a hostile entity. They're a totally hostile entity, and they should be treated as such, because they're fucking with the internet, and they're fucking with free speech and our ability to use this as a medium that for a while was meant to be used that way. I think the long-term play is exactly what we're experiencing now. What else do we have? It's disturbing. Days are numbered for EU. Isn't the EU going down? I hope so. I hope so. I hope it goes down harder than Stormy Daniels, because I heard Stormy Daniels went down real hard. It's just a bad joke. By the way, have you seen what's happening with Stormy Daniels? They're trying to turn her into this, like, they're trying to take the porn mask off of her, no makeup, make her like more real, more vulnerable. And you read these like, ooh, Stormy Daniels shows up at a Starbucks in New York and looks glamorous. Stormy Daniels at Fashion Week. I mean, who gives a fuck? And they're trying to turn her into this like natural beauty now. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. She, only she can do that. And the only way she can do that is to have a profound transformation of her character and identity, and to be able to enter into a realm of purity. And let me tell you, man, that takes some prayer. That takes some prayer, and that takes some really powerful intention. Let's see, what else do we have, Robert? What is the solution? That's a really great question, Charles, and it's something I ask myself every day. And when I first started to really get into this, right around 2008, 2009, before a lot of the, sort of the chains that are being, kind of erected, and some of the bear traps that have been set up. So 2008, 2009, there was a real sense that we could gather some momentum and use this medium in a way that would be a profound tool for social transformation. And by the way, it has. it has become a profound tool of social transformation. And the reason it has is because there are vast numbers of people waking up. Now, all of a sudden, they want to shut it down because it's getting a bit too close. It's like, okay, this thing is getting a little out of hand. You guys have had your fun, and we're going to shut this fucker down. All right. You know, we're going to just pull everything away. We're going to pull all the scrims. We're going to put all the scenery away. And this is what you're going to be left with. And this is what's happening now. So what we've done, and congratulations, we've reached kind of a level of critical mass where these people who are running, the tech, sort of the giant tech, in their satellites, and now they're freaking out, and they want to shut it down as fast as possible. So, and I think this all has a potential reaction, and because that's just the way things work. So the first thing I would say is not what to do, but don't do. First of all, don't be dismayed. Don't be dismayed if it looks like things are going in this direction, and there's going to be less and less and less opportunity at that level. Now, remember, where there is less opportunity in one level, there's more opportunity in another level. It's like, I use a really crude analogy. Like when I draft my fantasy football teams, if everybody's drafting wide receivers, and there's a shit ton of running backs, I'm going to draft a running back. I don't have to draft the dregs of being a wide receiver. So we have to find where the opportunity is, and it may not be here. It just may not be here, but I guarantee you there'll be opportunity somewhere else. And if you're smart and can connect with people in a way that is meaningful at a local level, there could be a whole other way of communicating, systems of communication. A long time ago, I read this book called what is it? The Handbook for a New Paradigm, that came through George Green, and there were like 20 volumes of this thing. And the first one just blew the roof off of my head. And it talked about getting in touch with sort of this new technology, new spiritual technology, new social technology. And the way you would have to do it is you'd have to do it in small groups of people, like ones and twos or threes. And that basically the whole idea was you'd get together and you would know what to do, but you'd get together and you'd be ready for the plan, whatever the plan was. And that once you began to meet again and again and again and again, a plan would emerge, a blueprint would emerge. And then through that, you would have these very clandestine, very secret, hermetically sealed connections with these other small groups. They're like sleeper cells. I mean, this is what the Handbook for the New Paradigm was talking about. And we might actually be in that time. We might be getting much closer to that time. And and I think ultimately the solution to the internet is the internet, right? Because this is a manifestation of what's already a part of who we are and how we are. I mean, think of people like the Aboriginal cultures in Australia who could communicate with one another across space and time through the dream time. They have that ability. And I think that we have that ability as well. And sometimes not having certain things can help us move towards that in an accelerated and maybe more efficient way. So I would say the solution is to kind of bring it local. I've been talking about this for a while now. I moved to an area. I got this town I'm living in has 8,000 people. So I think that there's probably a better opportunity to have a local reach here than where I was living before, which, has 1 million people. So I think that's where it's going. We're going to see more deconstruction. That's just the way it is. We've got some stuff happening now coming up with Idlib, perhaps, and what's going on with Syria and Turkey and that whole shit show. But it could really come down to like a final conflict in Idlib. I mean, it's getting very close to that. And if the Syrians or the Turks take it back, well, the Israelis are not going to be very, very happy at all, because they want Syria. The Israelis want Syria, and they want to put the guy who runs Is it Beirut, Lebanon? Not Lebanon, the other one. The other country there. Shit. They want to put Jordan. They want to put the guy from Jordan in charge and be the satellite ruler of Syria. That's what they want to do. And they want to turn Syria into condos. And the plan, by the way, for Gaza, the plan for Gaza is to turn Gaza into the new Dubai. That's their plan for Gaza. They want everybody out. They want them all out. And they want to turn Gaza into the new Dubai because it's right there on the coast and has all that coastal access. That's the plan. That is the plan. And so what's happening right now in that part of the world is about reshaping that part of the world for that plan. Oh, what's going on in the chat room? They've already slated us as wetware. It's scary. Oh, well, you're here. You chose to be here. A lot of people say, I didn't choose to fucking be here. No, you chose to be here. You chose to be here. So we have to evolve through this. I mean, these are really kind of amazing and weird times. It's unlike any other time in history. I mean, maybe you'd have to go back to, something prehistorical, or at least what we would consider to be prehistorical, like an Atlantean period or something along those lines. They're doing it to all the containment zones here in the U.S. Gentrify Gaza. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what they're doing. They want, you're right. Yeah. And what else do we have here? Tanya, yes, more waking up. They do not want us to know our power. Understanding is crucial. It is. It is. I mean, if the internet got taken away, the people who are really, really committed, just like I said, you'd get together in twos and threes, and you'd sit there and you'd link up. You'd link up with other people. It's not impossible. It is not impossible. We've been using this as an externalization of that process. Okay, so it's not impossible at all. John Stewart is running an animal farm rescue in New Jersey with his wife in farm sanctuary. Well, he's got enough money to do it. He probably knows what's up. They're leveling all the tribal areas using warfare so they can globalize it. Yeah, I'd agree with that. What else we have? He's big into animal rights movement. So was Hitler. Let's see. Repeat. He's a good man. Okay. He's a good man. I guess. I don't know him. I'd have to sit down with somebody to see if they're a good man. Just because they have a persona on TV. I thought Jon Stewart was very funny. He's very smart. He's a Sagittarius. I also felt like at times he was part of the program. That's a lie about Hitler. Hitler was into animal rights. Come on now. He was into animal rights. Am I right? Isn't that right? I didn't say he was a vegan. I said he was into animal rights. I didn't say he was a vegan. Anyway, I'm not here to promote Hitler. Robert, some of your ideas echo Dr. Bill Deagle. Amazing. Well, Deagle's an interesting guy. His son's an astrologer. So just not human rights. Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to go down the Hitler rabbit hole tonight. I want to keep my YouTube channel. As above, so below. We are fractals of the universe. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. In a lot of ways, the internet has become a real irony and a paradox, because in some ways it's been very empowering. We're having this exchange right now. All of us. Isn't that cool, right? We're having this exchange. We're exchanging ideas. It's a Sunday night. We could be watching, the Cowboys, but we're not. We're here. We're doing this thing. And at the same time, it's also kind of a pen. And it is a field of containment. And it's become very comfortable in a lot of ways for that. And in some ways, we might be moved out of our comfort zone. And that's when it'll get real interesting. Hey, there's Heather. She's late to the party. Hey, Heather and I, by the way, we're going to be doing a webinar about what to expect in 2019, the changes that are coming in 2019. So Heather's putting together the information for that webinar, and we're going to be doing that together. And that's going to be great, because Heather and I have our various areas of kind of expertise. And we love working together. So if you guys want to jump in on webinar, she'll have more information and a lot more information. Let's see. When is it? We haven't set a date, but by the time I show up back here next week, we'll have a date and we'll have a place for everybody to sign up, and it'll be great because Heather and I do really interesting work, and we have this unique connection and bond that allows her to kind of go in one direction and kind of move energy in one direction, and I come from another direction, and it just works. It works really, really well. You want to get out of 2018. 2018 has been an intense fucking year, but I don't think they're going to get any easier. Okay, let's just keep it. Let's keep this in perspective. I mean, we are in it. We're in a birth canal now, and this is not. This ain't no disco. We're very different times, very, very different times, and there's no looking back either. That's something mythologically that we can, I think, gain some insight from. When Orpheus is leaving the catacombs and Eurydice is behind him, and he was told, not to look back or he would lose Eurydice forever. He's tricked into looking back. And when he does, he sees that Eurydice's beloved was right behind him. And when he does, and he looks back, everything is lost. So there might be some very interesting import. And there may be like times in our lives where we're going to have to, let go of people and what those relationships mean and how they were formulated and what their monad was, but they may not be really they may not be essential to where things are going. And that's going to be hard for people. That'll be very difficult for people. That's one of the most difficult things that I think we can go through. But I would say try to get into the local space and connect with people in a way that you can begin to commune with, whatever that means for you. I'm going to the Mars Retro and Direct podcast. Yeah, that was like the wrecking ball. That Mars retrograde was the wrecking ball. They wound it up. They got everything in alignment and then took a few major pieces out and then, began to smash the infrastructure. Taking care of health and energy and space, you got to take care of your health. And they make that pretty difficult already. I heard this interesting theory about Trump because we all know that Trump eats shit food, right? He loves McDonald's and he loves KFC. And so there's this theory that Trump eats fast food because he doesn't trust the people that prepare his food. I actually kind of get it. I get it. What else? Smash away. Yeah. Connecting with others is so hard. You have to. I mean, it's isolation is terrible. And more people suffer from isolation now than it probably, it's ironic too. Here we are, we're so connected and there are so many isolated people. And maybe that's why we're connected is because we're so isolated. And that's why this tool has been really valuable for us. Yeah. Fast food. Best case scenario, what would happen? Oh boy. Well, I think we're looking at Uranus and Taurus with the big changes, and those are going to be earth changes and monetary changes. Because the whole idea here is to get people off of cash. That's where it's all going. And Uranus and Taurus is going to be the end of cash. It's new money. So I think we can pretty much agree that that's going to occur. I think with the solar minimum and Uranus and Taurus with earth changes, those are going to occur as well. Will we have a conflict in the Middle East? Will World War III spring up there? I think ultimately we're probably going to have a conflict with the Chinese. That's my sense. Okay. That is my sense. And maybe it's just all kabuki theater because we do all these exercises and drills together. If it's all kabuki theater, then, it's all, whatever. We can't do anything about that. But I think there's going to be something coming down with the Chinese. It just feels destined to me. Maybe so next week I'll do a chart on the EU and I'll do a chart on like China, like when it became the People's Republic. I haven't done a chart on China. I think it'd be interesting to do. And that gets back to that whole Aquarian piece, or what happens with Aquarius and apparently what they were doing with that area in China with with that subterranean weapon, right? I feel like that's coming back up again. Did you see Kath? No, no, I didn't see it, but Murray suggested that I watch it. He said it was a really good. He said it was a really good interview. So why don't we do a little unconditional love tonight? We haven't done our unconditional love moment tonight. I tell you what. Why don't we do a little unconditional love to? Oh, let's see. How about Linda Gordon? Linda Gordon, unconditional love. We love you unconditionally, Linda. We love you unconditionally. Right there. That's for you, Linda. That's for you. Okay. So if you feel like dropping Linda a little unconditional love, doesn't hurt. It really doesn't hurt. Just drop a little unconditional love in the chat box. We do this every week. We pick one person. Last week was Judy. She got a little, I think, at the end of the show. She got some. Maybe she didn't get enough. Judy, we know we unconditionally love you. And that's a fact, Jack. Okay. All right. It is 8:44, 8:45. I've been doing this now for an hour and 45 minutes. Thank you all for checking in with me tonight here on the Sunday night live stream. Oh, by the way, I have a new video up with Regina Meredith. It's interesting. It's the first Regina video where she doesn't allow any comments on the video. When you see the video, you'll understand why. Regina gets a little hot under the collar, boy. See, it's a little hot under the collar, and you'll see why if you watch that video. Anyway, go check that out. That's on reginameredith.com. Some good information. We talk about what's happening in the fall, some of the stuff I talked about tonight. And that's it. Hey, go to my website if you're interested in a reading. I've got a great astrology course, which is very affordable. If you're ever interested in astrology, you can go there, purchase it. You get a natal chart and you get a natal report along with the reading. And then next week, I'll have some information about the webinar with Heather and I. Okay. All right. So God bless you all right there, from my heart to yours. Have a great Monday and have a great week. And I'll be back tomorrow on the Farcast. Go to the Robert Phoenix channel, subscribe, hit the bell over there. You'll be able to hang out with me for about a half hour each morning. Okay. Okay. Good night, everybody.